Let's just kick this off. First off, welcome to everyone that made it to the webinar. We are very, very happy to be sharing these insights and a little bit of the knowledge that we have developed, and some case studies as well. And as we mentioned at the end of this presentation, we hope that you get a lot of insights that you can apply to your own work or either your personal life. Without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing that we would like to ask you as part of the workshop on the next slide, Nai, if you could go there. It's before we start, it would be great if you could turn your camera off on, by the way. It's better for us if we can see you and see, you know, like, because of this new COVID situation, it's great having a look at having the ability to have human faces around us. At least for us, that's a great way to communicate with you guys. If you could, during the presentation, have your mic on mute. We are going to have some minutes at the end so that you can maybe speak out and ask your questions. But for now, it would be great if you could leave it on mute. The last thing that I would like to share is that this webinar will be recorded. Are you guys okay with that? Thumbs up, yeah? All right, that's great. So let's get started then. I would just like quickly give a quick introduction. We have today with us Nayara Borges. She's from Brazil, so it's very early in the morning for her. I guess it's 3 a.m. right now. So she made it to the webinar. Thank you for that, Nay. She's the product lead at Echoes. We have also human-centered design and facilitator, my friend and workmate Daniel Yarachi. There we go. And finally, myself, I'm a design thinker and visual designer at Echoes. And we are very, very happy that you guys made it today and to have you here. Now that you know a little bit about us, we would love to hear from you. So we would like for you to share in the chat your name, the city where you're from, and what you do for work, and also what you are hoping to hear about in this webinar. So we'll give you 1 minute to write down in the chat. Nayara already put the questions in the chat to make it easier for you to follow. And we start right now. So in 1 minute, let's do that. Nice. So I can see that we have Josepina for his nickname Pepe. I would say that it's something Spanish. It's very usual to have like Pepe from Spanish people. Lenny's from the UK, living in Melbourne. That's also working in a law firm, hoping to learn something new about design thinking and innovation. That's great. Ray is talking from Qatar. Is that correct?
Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
I'm from Lebanon, but I work and live in Qatar.
Yeah, wow. That's awesome. Like to learn more about design thinking and how to apply to information literacy teaching and research. Great. Yeah, I was right. Jose is from Spain. Welcome, man.
David's from Singapore, wanting to learn how design thinking works as well. Very cool.
Nice.
Wow. So have people from.
We've spent a lot of time in Singapore.
He would probably say that Singapore is humid and hot right now.
That's generally how it is, yeah.
Cool. Well, it's nice to see that you have people from different parts of the world, and we, as for those who don't know us, or for those who know a little bit, we at ECOS, we are considered like an independent global innovation lab. And as you can see in this map, we are also like spread in the world. We have some offices in Brazil, in Portugal, and Australia. So the guys, Paul and Daniel, are now based in Australia, in Sydney, and me in Brazil. And we, as a Global Innovation Lab, if you can pass, thank you, Dan. As a Global Innovation Lab, we operate on basis of 3 business units. We have the School of Design Thinking, where we try to bring and to teach this design thinking mindset in our bunch of courses. So we have courses about service design, design thinking, business design. Another business unit that we have is the innovation projects. So there we try to work together with companies from different sectors, helping them with their projects, especially with their innovation projects, to try to bring this innovative culture to their organizations. And also in the end, we have the ventures business unit, where we try to bring this agile mindset of design thinking to start new business in different segments, mostly in education, but we also have other business in different sectors. So this is how we are somehow operating as an innovation lab. And we, with these, like operating these 3 business units, we've been doing this for the last almost 10 years. So next year we are doing anniversary, and we've been making some impact throughout these 10 years. And just to show you about the numbers that we've achieved in this time. So we had more than 35,000 people that has done some courses with us. It has passed through our courses.
Yeah, I think we just lost Night for a second, but as she was saying, like more than 70,000 people have gone through our online courses. That's a massive number. We are very happy with that. And we have more than 100 projects developed with clients from big organizations and small ones. And our latest project was with Google. It's still running. And we've done some massive work with the Google News Initiative in Asia Pacific. ECOS, interesting thing about ECOS, we are the only non-educational sorry, it's not dropped. Okay, cool. So we are the only ones that are independent as a company, which is part of the Global Design Thinking Alliance. And that's very good because we have access to a global network of innovators and people doing research, and we can communicate and get a lot of information from them. In our next slide, ECOS, our purpose is really to foster innovation, and it's not just about fostering innovation, but as you could tell by looking at the numbers, we are really engaged into making people innovators, helping them to become better innovators. And one more interesting thing about this is that we do that through design. And when we talk about innovation, you can see and you can tell that there are many definitions of it. And we would like to ask you, in your point, what does innovation mean to you? So we will give you 2 minutes for that. And you can write down and share with us in the chat your definition or your understanding of innovation.
We have something new and useful. It's definitely a good description of innovation.
Absolutely.
Change that adds value. Yeah, I like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Rethinking an old product's use. Absolutely, yeah. Innovation can be the way in which you just use something that exists. I like that.
Yeah,
finding
absolutely.
a new way to meet a company cause mission. Yeah.
There are different levels of innovation as well. So you will find every time you start studying it, you see that there is incremental innovation, which is what you guys mentioned here, like taking something that exists and making it like better and adding a twist to it. And there is disruptive innovation as well, which is like, let's say, Uber taking over the transportation industry compared against the taxi industry, which is this thing that disrupts everything. New things and methods, nice. Achieving desired results in an easier and quicker, better way.
Yeah, that's really good. Also, I think we might have had 1 or 2 new people joining. So for those of us who joined, welcome. We're just basically discussing what innovation is to us. So for the last couple of seconds, if you want to add your thoughts on innovation in the chat, feel free to join in. Otherwise, we'll probably start moving on shortly. Intersection of need and novelty, the overlap of invention to insights. It's a very interesting way of putting it. I like that. I haven't heard it put quite that way. It's very cool. Okay, maybe we should move on.
Yeah, sure. So now, Daniel, as you are already interacting here, I would like to ask you to
You want me to jump in?
Tell us a little bit about the innovation from the Echo's perspective.
That was a nice segue. I like what you did there. Okay. Yes, so now we're going to basically give a little bit of an overview of how we define innovation, which is kind of touching on a lot of points that have already been said, but I think slightly in a more simplistic way. So the way we tend to define innovation is in 2 parts. So one of them is perceived value, which, you know, we were talking, or there were points about value already. And I think the interesting thing about perceived value is that it's not necessarily something tangible. It's something that can be, it's perceived, right? It's a perception. So money has a tangible value, whereas what we're talking about is something that may not necessarily translate in that way. It could be an experience. It could be something that is a little bit more human in the way that we interact with it or in the way that we perceive it. But the second part is that innovation is around changing patterns. And by this, we mean it could be patterns of human behavior. They could be patterns of systems. They could be patterns of organizations, all these different types of patterns. Part of innovation is essentially disrupting and shifting those patterns into a new pattern. So those are the 2 main kind of components that we talk about innovation with. But driving all of that is design. And so when we talk about design, and, you know, for anyone who's maybe familiar with design thinking, this won't be too new, but for some people, design really does conjure up this idea of its visual, its graphic design, its architectural design, its product. It's sort of very much within that physical visual world. Design thinking, however, is much more of a strategic approach. So it's a much more all-encompassing way of looking at something, and it's a methodology that drives innovation. So we'll explain a little bit more about what that means as we go through. But we tend to use this almost as a mantra, you could call it. So we believe in the power of design to transform realities and create desirable futures. And so design really is just the driver behind innovation in everything that we do. So a little bit about what is design thinking. In a sort of single line, human-centered innovation is kind of the best sort of summary of that. And we'll start to unpack that in the next few slides. But I just wanted to start with that just to keep it in the back of your minds. So human-centered innovation is what we're really striving for here. And I think a good way to explain that or start to unpack that is to look at what we would consider a traditional model for not only innovation or just generally problem solving from an organizational point of view. And this graph is one way that we like to sort of explain that. So typically speaking, when organizations want to create a solution or create some form of innovation, typically speaking, and then this is a bit of a generalization, but generally speaking, what they'll do is they'll start from a business problem perspective. So that could be something like, we need to increase our revenue, we need to gain a higher percentage of this market share, or we need to integrate these two silos of our organization, whatever it is that is from a business perspective seen as a problem. From there, they'll create solutions through a range of different ways, whether that's with market research or internal R&D teams. And then they'll hope and pray that this solution sticks. So they'll send that out to the market or to their internal organization, and they'll do that through mass marketing, advertising, whatever kind of method they want. And it's kind of a, let's hope that there's uptake on our solution. The difference with design thinking, and when we compare the two, when we look at design thinking, we tend to look at this model on the right-hand side here, which is rather than simply starting from the business point of view and trying to create a solution based on that, we still take that business challenge up front. So we could say, okay, if the problem is we need more of a revenue stream, rather than simply jumping to a solution and then trying to force that down to our users, we step back and say, let's actually talk to our users first, not just in a market research way, but in a much more design research way, which uses different methods, and we'll talk about that later. But let's actually start to talk to our users and get to know their needs quite in depth. And from there, we'll be able to start to backtrack to a solution that we know is much more likely to stick because they've been involved from pretty much the get-go. So the difference between these two models and the way I kind of tend to think of it is the traditional model, generally, it's a bit more high risk for a few reasons. I think firstly, there's a lot more resource required up front. And typically what that could be is, you might need quite a large budget. You'll need a larger team to sort of achieve whatever kind of solution you're trying to work towards. And typically, because the user hasn't really been brought in too early, there's a very real risk that it could flop at the end of the day. Not always, sometimes it can work, and that's great too, but quite often you'll send something to market and it really is, let's cross our fingers and hope that this actually lands and really sticks. Whereas in a design thinking approach, it's a lot leaner. Firstly, it's a lot quicker in terms of the time. And secondly, there's a lot less required in terms of resource devoted to it. So it's a much cheaper method, and I'll explain why it's cheaper later, but it doesn't require a whole lot of investment up front before you get to a solution. And part of that is you're able to get to a solution not only quicker, but in a way that is much more cost effective. You're not building expensive prototypes or final products that are going to go to market and may or may not work. So this is kind of the general view between the old model and the design thinking model, and the way we tend to think of that. As Paolo has actually put in the chat as well, with design thinking, we start with the user, which is basically a good segue into this this slide, which is kind of the crux of what we're talking about here, which is putting people at the center of our decisions, so that when we're creating solutions, they're grounded in real human needs, and these human needs are our users' needs, whether it's the employees in the organization we're working for, whether it's our end clients in the real world, whether it's another business if it's a B2B context. whatever it is. We're starting with their needs, and then we're working back to a solution that's actually going to add value for them, right? So again, sort of looking back to perceived value, that's the purpose here. We're trying to create perceived value based on the needs that we've discovered. There's three kind of components to design thinking challenge. There's two on the screen, but I'll show the third one in a minute. So the way we sort of approach design thinking problems is they need to hit three key components. One is the solution needs to be technically possible. So we need to be able to create it, or at least know how we can outsource production to someone who can achieve this final product. It needs to be financially viable. So it needs to actually be able to, not go broke, make sure that we're actually going to turn a profit on this. But lastly, and most importantly, it needs to be desirable. And this is where we go back again to the user needs. We need to make sure that we've actually created something that our users care about, they really, really want, before we even consider the rest of those three components. So we start with desirability. Again, we have to make sure that we're hitting all three. So it's not a one over the other, but we are making sure that ultimately it's desirable first, in order to then guarantee that we're much more likely to have a good uptake at the end of that once we launch something into the market. So looking into how we actually make this process work, I'm going to show a little graphic here. You may have seen it. If you haven't, hopefully this will be interesting and new. Some of you might know what this is. So this is the double diamond. And it's a format that was created by the UK Design Council around 2005. And it was based on their research into how innovation generally flows when put into practice. So they'd spoken to a lot of organizations that generally either focus specifically on innovation or simply were trying to push innovation through their organizations. And through a lot of their research, they synthesized, this is typically the model in which it works. And we'll break it down now as to how it actually works. So you can see it's broken up into 4 quadrants, and they also diverge and converge. I'll explain why in a moment. And the 4 quadrants are discover, or the discovery phase, the definition phase, the development phase, and then lastly, the delivery phase. And I'll break down what those ones mean. So firstly, we have the discovery phase. And in this phase, we're basically trying to find as much information as we can about the problem space that we want to work within. So for example, if we're trying to create a new product in order to gain a new market share, let's say we want the 18 to 30-year-old market, we're not getting that in our organization. So we're going to start by really expanding our knowledge of this market's mindset. And the way we'll do that is research. Not traditionally in a market research way, because that's market research is useful, but we tend to use that later on. We tend to use design research methods, which are generally much more guerrilla. So we're basically going out into the world, talking to people, even on the street potentially, or we might be talking to other employees within an organization if it's an internal project or something like that. But the main purpose really is to gain as much knowledge as we can, which is why we say it's an expansive stage. This is where we diverge, we go out and get as much in as we can, so that we basically have a lot of nodes of information to work with. From there, we start to focus down. So this is where we're really defining a point of view. So once we've gained a lot of information, a lot of research, we can start to see emerging patterns and trends. And we'll look at themes where we basically say, okay, I'm starting to see a human need here. This is actually creating an actionable insight. I can see this is a common theme. And so from there, we can really start to narrow down on a much more clear problem. So like I said earlier, we may have started with a business problem, which is something like we need more money, and that's fair. But now we're getting to the user's problem. Well, what is it that we can actually add in terms of value for the user that will eventually create a product and service that will give us that revenue that we're looking for, right? So now we end up with this reframed problem, which is where we then move to the next phase of development, which is where we go wide again, where we basically create a whole lot of potential solutions. These are concepts, right? So we're coming up with ideas to solve this problem very specifically. It could be multiple problems, but generally it might be one specific problem we want to solve. And here we're not yet building anything. So this is why I kind of mentioned this is a very resource light process. We're not building a prototype at this stage. We're literally, we could be drawing stuff down on Post-it notes or napkins or whatever it is. All we're trying to do is get our ideas down on the table as quickly as we possibly can, so that we can move into the next stage, which is delivery. And here we're starting to narrow down. So this is where we'll basically look at the concepts we've created so far, and we'll say, okay, you know what, out of the, could be hundreds, right? We've got a whole lot of concepts on the table. We've now as a group decided that, let's say these 3 are the ones that we're really going to try and test further. So we're now going to start to narrow down there and create very rough prototypes. And these are things that could be, again, it could be like a sketched storyboards. It might be that you've maybe filmed yourself explaining something. Maybe if it was a service experience, maybe you're kind of reenacting that in some way. You could maybe do something really, really simple, like a role-playing exercise. Whatever it is, it's basically a very rough, cheap, costs you next to nothing way of getting an idea in a way that it can express itself to people. And the purpose of that is, now we're going to go out and we're going to show this prototype to the people that we're trying to solve our problem for. So in doing so, what we're doing is we're trying to get feedback. And with this feedback, we can say, okay, the prototype so far is working. Maybe there's a really key component that's absolutely hitting the nail on the head. Maybe this part isn't working quite right, or maybe we've actually completely missed the mark. And the benefit here is whatever we need to change, and usually there are things that we need to change. This so far, the process hasn't been very time consuming or expensive. So in terms of an organization's investment, it's very low, which means we're actually not wasting a lot of resources getting to this point already. We haven't built and launched something into market only to say, oh, wow, that failed spectacularly. We're in a very rough, low fidelity phase. So we can kind of keep iterating quite a bit at this point without really expending a whole lot of resource. And once we've gotten to a point where we're happy that, okay, this is actually working well, we've validated this concept, we know it's going to really work in the market, then we can start to develop it into much more of a high fidelity, a minimum viable product or some final product that we want to ship, whatever it is. But we're much more confident in what we've got. So we know it's much more likely to succeed when we get to the market. So that's a general overview of the process. I know I've been talking a lot and I'm going to talk more, but hopefully that's easy to understand as well. So as a quick recap, the first diamond in the double diamond is all about really understanding the problem. So you're trying to really get to grips with what is the problem we're trying to solve properly. And then in the second stage, it's all about how can we create a solution that is really effective. So a way I want to kind of help elaborate what I've just gone over is by talking about a case study that we've actually quite recently finished as a team here. So this is part of a project that I think Paula mentioned earlier for Google's News Initiative project. So we were a part of the first Design Accelerator program across the Asia Pacific region, where we worked with a lot of partners in different regions, some in Singapore actually, and basically helped them to try and solve some of these business problems that they were coming up against. And this particular case study is for a client, or a partner, I should say, called Reader, and they're based in Taiwan. So Reader is a news media organization that's actually, they're a startup, and they're owned by a larger organization. But what they tend to do is create these reports that are a lot more engaging and transparent to the people of Taiwan. However, when they came to us, their business problem, which probably echoes what I already said, is how do we create a new business model? We need more revenue. So that was the way that they basically presented themselves. They said, we need more money. We're currently relying on funds from our parent organization, but we want to separate into our own entity. So we need to be financially stable to do that, which is a totally valid place to start. However, obviously that's not really addressing the user's needs. So currently where they were at wasn't really enough to really sort of create any solutions based off the back of that general business problem. So we had to sort of take them through the process. So the way we did that, and I'll take you through it now. Again, we started with the first phase, discovery. So let's go out, let's start talking to your audience and find out what exactly they really care about. What do they need? Are we even serving them what they need? And we did that through a few methods, but mostly it was in-field research. So this is where we basically went out into the field and decided we knew who are the people that we want to talk to. We kind of knew our audience roughly, but we had to go find them in the street basically and start to talk to them and say, what is it that's currently missing from the news that you're looking for? What is it that, what are the real needs that you're trying to address in your life that might ladder back to us as an organization that we can help to solve. And there are, I won't go too much into the granular of how we do that. We actually have a toolkit that I'm going to share with you at the end that really gives you some tools on how you can do this. But just generally speaking, we basically went out, found people to talk to, and started to get a lot of information back and a lot of interesting research. And these are just some photos of us out in the field, talking to people, getting to know them, getting to find out about what it is that they really wanted that we could help serve. Welcome to the newcomers. We're just talking through a case study that's explaining design thinking and how it works. So hopefully it's not too confusing if you've just jumped in. So from that point, we basically collected a whole lot of information. So I think you sort of saw before, we had boards that were just covered in Post-it notes full of information based on everyone that we met. So now it was about synthesizing that into something a bit more tangible, a little bit more human in terms of the needs, right? So we started to look for the common themes that were emerging. We started to cluster information together to sort of see what are the trends, what is, not just what are the trends, but also what's it saying about the human driver behind it. Quite often people will look at sort of research and just say, okay, the trend is people use social media a lot more, which is valid, but it's not really talking about a human need. We're trying to get to the real human understanding here. So what is it that people really need? What are their jobs to be done that we're trying to solve? And how can we do that? So we eventually came down to a much clearer point of view based on two key personas, right? So at the end of the day, we realized there are two people that we're trying to serve. One of them are what we would call contributors. These are basically highly engaged readers. So they actually really want to be involved. They're not just your average, pass-by consumer. They read it every day. They actually want to be actively contributing to the process. But the driver behind that, the reason why they care about contributing to the process is they have a strong sense of civic duty. They actually care about Taiwan. They're quite patriotic, and they want to collaborate to make it a better country. They want it to be more progressive, more forward-thinking, more innovative. They want to see Taiwan succeed, essentially, right? So that's their motivator behind that. The other group were the readers. These are the sort of broader audience that we also still wanted to address for. And the main kind of information that we found from them, or the main insight that we got to, was that they want access to quality, reliable information. And a lot of this stemmed from big issues around misinformation. We see this everywhere in the world, but it's very prominent in Taiwan as well. Problems with fake news, problem with basically disinformation being seeded out quite rapidly. This is a problem for them. They felt, well, we don't know who to trust. We want to make sure that when we're reading the news, this is something we can really feel confident in. So these were the two main problems. How can we help people collaborate in order to drive Taiwan forward? And how can we give them information that is reliable and help them feel more at ease in trusting the information that they're reading, right? So these are our kind of problem statements. Then we go back into that sort of divergent stage where we're trying to develop solutions. So we're coming up with a whole range of solutions, and we're doing this mostly through brainstorming activities, bringing a lot of different stakeholders in to really get a lot of information and a lot of different points of view. So the teams that we're using, I should mention actually, it's a very diverse team across these projects. We always make sure that we're actually representing people from different parts of the organization, and for a lot of different reasons, but primarily for different points of view and good amounts of understanding across the spectrum of information that we need. So at this stage, we've got a whole lot of people in the room and we're brainstorming, coming up with really interesting ideas. And like I said earlier, it's very cheap. We're just sketching stuff out. No one's building anything. We're not developing, prototypes that need, coding or front-end development or physically building anything other than, we could make something out of paper and plastic and things like that, but it's very cheap and low fidelity. And from there, we ended up with a range of concepts that we decided were worth testing, right? So these were still in the hypothesis stage. We hadn't yet brought this back out to the audience. So we'd done our internal kind of group collective work here and decided, okay, these are the three that we want to start to take out into the world, right? So at that point, we had a few different ideas to try and solve the problems that I mentioned earlier. So for the contributors, for those who really wanted to engage, we had these ideas around them allowing to do things like transcribing videos, submitting photos to be part of content, and also sharing their opinion on topics that we were researching. So basically helping them become a part of the actual content creation process. These were some of the main ideas that we wanted to test. And then for the readers, we wanted to help give them reliable, more open information in the hopes that they might actually want to support our cause. So this is where we're still trying to sort of manage some of the stakeholders who was talking about revenue. We were saying, well, I think maybe there's a way we can do that this way, but we still need to test that. And so this was basically where we got to in terms of the development beginnings. So from there, we started to work on the prototypes. This is where we started to get a little bit more in depth. We started by prototyping out storyboards, basically creating an understanding of what the user journey would look like. And in doing so, we could then take this back out into the real world and start to get an understanding from our audience. Is this something that you resonate with? Do you care about it? Is this interesting to you? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And they gave us really great feedback. And the benefit from that is the feedback, when I say great, it doesn't mean it was always positive. Bad feedback is still good feedback. They would give us, a lot of honest, opinions. Yes, I like this. No, I don't really like that. I wish it had something like that. And like I said earlier, we can now go back, reiterate in a very cheap way, and then go back out into the street again and keep testing until we sort of get to that final stage where we know, okay, we've kind of cracked the problem here. At that point, we would start to build a slightly more higher fidelity prototype. So we might, depending on what the product is, in this case, because we're working on a website, we would go through a very kind of rough, quick website development tool, like something like a Wix or Webflow or Squarespace, where we're just sort of quickly building something that gets the information across that we want, so that we can start to show it to people again in a more high fidelity way. And at this point, we can start to maybe test a bit more of the experience. So we've already established that the value proposition is solid. People are resonating with that. Now let's start to sort of fine tweak the experience and make sure that people are engaging with that as well. And we can kind of continue to ladder up the fidelity there and make it more advanced as we kind of get that feedback and make sure it's really working well. And that basically ended up with these two different types of solutions. So I kind of mentioned earlier, we started with a couple of ideas based on the feedback that we got. We ended up with these different types of features that we wanted to deploy in our launch product. So for the first group, or the first persona, these were the contributors. So going back to what their need was, they wanted to collaborate to make Taiwan a better place. How could we add value for them to do that? So I mentioned the sort of transcription of videos and submitting content. These are all based on different projects that we would put out there for people to sort of want to be a part of. So, and these projects were content pieces. They were stories and sort of pieces of content that would serve the civic benefit of the country, as a news media organization would. And for the readers, we gave them a few different options. So we gave them access to our open data. So as we put content out there in the world, we made sure everything was very transparent. There was a very clear source to the resources that we've been linking to. So everything was sort of very out in the open. There was no hidden, agenda. Nothing was sort of untrackable in terms of where it came from. It was all very clear. We also gave them the option to rate the content as well. We'd previously done that a little bit, but now we kind of made that a lot more prominent in terms of where it was featured. So there was this star rating at the end of each piece of content, which meant that we could create an interesting feedback loop. And that was something that was brought up through the research and through the testing. People wanted to be able to say, I want to let you know if I like it or not. I want you to actually hear my voice, right? So that was one of the other sort of aspects. And then furthermore, we also gave them the ability to donate if they felt the content was valid as well. And from there, when we talk about perceived value, it's obviously something to, the best way to see that is to look at the results. Did it actually work, right? And thankfully, we launched this 2 months ago. And since then, we've had 40,000 new users, which is roughly one every 30 seconds, which is incredible. I think for the dwell time on content, previously was around, I think 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. I think it was closer to 3.7 minutes. So that's gone up to 5 minutes per page. So obviously people are much more engaging in the content. It obviously has a lot more value. People, I always say on the internet, seconds are sort of years. So any sort of additional seconds you can get is basically a win. And in terms of the 5-star rating for the content, so previously we were getting around 4.3 stars out of 5. It's now gone up to closer to 4.6. I think it was even 4.7 or 8 on a couple. So but roughly around 4.6, which is a good shift in the needle there. So that's a good quick run through one of the projects that we've done. And hopefully that gives you a good understanding of how we deliver these design thinking projects and also the value that they create as well. And that's pretty much it from me. So I'm going to hand over to, I think, Paolo to do a very quick discussion on, we're going to announce a course that we're launching. And then we're just going to very quickly talk about that. And then we're going to go into a Q&A. So Paolo, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Daniel. It's going to be very, very quick. It's just really to give you an overview because we are very proud of being launching this course. To be honest, it's the course that I wish I had access to when I was starting in design thinking. As you can tell, it reflects what we did with the presentation. So everything is very step by step so that you can really create a great foundation in design thinking. This is the identity of the course. In the next page, you can have a quick overview of the module. You will see that we are going to dig a little bit deeper on what's design and design thinking, how it works, why it's important. And then we are going to go again and going deeper now into one of the each phase of the double diamond. So you are going to go through the whole double diamond again, and then we're going to wrap it up. 7 modules. One very, very interesting thing about this course is that we wanted to engage more with our students. So we've created these live sessions, and it's going to be a great opportunity for people to interact with us and have questions answered. And the next slide, you can see that another feature is that it's project-based. So you are gonna work on real projects. It's not just theory. We believe in learn by doing, and you have the opportunity to do that. And that's pretty much it. On the right here, you have a QR code which will give you access to the course page where you can have a look at the syllabus, see if it's interesting for you. And we are also sharing with you our design thinking toolkit where you have a lot of tools. We have tools for each of the phases that we mentioned here, and all the instructions are there. It's for free for you guys to use it. And that's pretty much it. I'm not sure if Nai would like to comment anything on it. Is she here? I think she dropped.
Yeah, no, I'm back.
Okay.
I'm on
Okay,
my
you're
mobile
back.
phone.
Great.
I don't know what happened with the internet here. It
Welcome
just like,
back.
thank you. So I'm using the mobile trying to, no, I think it's pretty much that. I think it's just highlight this that you mentioned, like we are very happy to share all those learnings that we've got in this past months, and also to launch our course. It's very nice to have you guys with us this night, morning. I don't know what is the time zone for you guys. Yeah, I think basically that's it. It would be nice to hear from you now, like if you have any questions, or we are more than happy to answer
Absolutely.
those. Yeah, so we are open to that now for
You can either
few
speak
minutes.
out or just share your questions in the chat. We're more than happy to answer.
Thank you, David. Hope it was helpful.
Questions?
If there is anything about the content or about the course or about, the case study,
Design
the
thinking in
result,
general.
design thinking in general. Yes, absolutely. One interesting thing, like as while we wait for the questions, is that we are co-creating this course with the first cohort. So the people who join us for this first cohort is gonna be giving us feedback, and it's gonna be helping us to improve and also to kind of tailor the experience to match the needs that are out there. Yeah, and of course, if you don't have any questions, just feel free to check our website and the course page, and yeah, reach out if you have any questions. We are more than happy to answer.
And also, like, we have a ritual at Echoes, which we call I Like, I Wish. So if you can send us a message, what you liked from this this day that we spent, like this moment that we spent together, or what you wish to have in this moment that we spent together, that would be very nice for us to keep improving these interactions with you and bringing also content and information that is valuable for you. So that is very helpful. That's our way of keep iterating and listening to you, to your needs, and improving the ways we get together.
Yeah, sure. I just have a question in the chat.
Cool.
Ray is asking, would design thinking be a useful tool to apply to online teaching and learning? What you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly. I mean, I think, in terms of online teaching and learning, we've actually, obviously we do that as well. The way we would sort of utilize design thinking is, again, if let's say you're creating a course, you're creating some online learning experience, again, you can very easily start to build out research to basically sort of validate or invalidate your hypotheses. So potentially, depends what you're trying to do. It could be that you're trying to test, is this course even of interest to people? That could be something that you could do, start using the design thinking toolkit to determine what people want to learn online. Or it could be more focused on the experience itself. So if the course is already validated, but maybe you want to start iterating around how does the actual course flow, again, you can start using the same toolkit as well. It's very, very adaptable to a lot of different types of challenges. So I guess that would be the simplest answer I could give.
Yeah, and there are a lot of different and interesting case studies out there on education. My sister is a teacher, and I'm really pushing for her to learn more about design thinking and implement the methodology with her students, which are all kids from 5 to 10. That would be great for them to get access to this kind of methodology, and I'm pretty sure that the results would be amazing.
The problem with online teaching, it seems like design thinking is more for people who are ready for a change, but when it comes to students, they don't really, they just don't want to do it. They don't want to even think about how can we do this better, or they try to get away from it rather than rethinking how they can do it better and giving feedback. That's the struggle with them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's a tricky thing, isn't it, when you're dealing with a mindset change, really. And I guess it's hard for children. I mean, I don't know, or if they're teenagers or whatever, I guess.
College students.
College.
Yes.
Okay, wow. I would have expected a bit more open-mindedness, but that's okay. Yeah, I suppose the best way then to try and think about it is to sort of ask them more so what it is that they want or what it is that they struggle with. And it, like you said, if they just want to leave it, it's a hard thing to convince someone to do something they don't want to do. But what you may find, depending on how large the group is, if there is some cohort that is even a small number of people that are willing to engage in it, you don't necessarily need the whole group to do it. What you might find is that by starting with a small team, let's say, I'm not sure how many students you have, but if it was 30 students per class or something like that, even if 4 or 5 of them were willing to be a part of it, or 3 or whoever, they might start to actually see the value of that might start to seep out to the rest of the group once you start to implement that. So when you're going through and kind of taking these learnings from this particular team, what may happen is you might start sharing that back with the rest of the group. Hey, we've actually learned this and that. What does everyone else think? They may be willing to start to engage with it slowly because you're not so much asking everyone to do the work. You're just sort of slowly drawing them in through that kind of a, you know, look, we've kind of done a little bit of the headway over here. Now you can start to sort of step in a little bit. That may be one approach. It's kind of the way I would consider it off the top of my head. But I'm sure there's other approaches too. Yeah. But I feel your frustration dealing with kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to quickly share, Tatiana just asked if Reader has increased their revenue, and I just answered that they are in the process. The interesting thing about the case study with Reader is that instead of going and trying to make money first, what they realized is that they needed to have a better understanding of their audience and how they could create value for that audience. So their process is divided into main phases. So the first one is to reintroduce Reader to people. So they're trying to show people what they do and really interact and get more people to know them. And when they have that audience which use their product and see values in it, it's really when they're going to start pushing a little bit more to revamp and to design their business model and their revenue streams. Would you like to add anything here, Daniel?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think we are almost at time. So happy if people need to head off. I know we've all got busy days and evenings. If there are any other questions, we're happy to answer them, but we understand that it's kind of a time now. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being here. I appreciate it. We hope it was useful. Feel free to check out the links if the course is of interest to you, and certainly by all means grab the toolkit. I'm sure it's very useful as well. So thank you all for being here. Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Chat soon.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.